My mother drove away and left me alone in the Rocky Mountains when I was 16 years old. No flashlight, no supplies, no way home. She said it would make me stronger. What she didn't count on was that I'd survive, and that one day I'd tell the world exactly who she really is. If you've ever been betrayed by the one person who was supposed to protect you, hit that like button right now. And if you want to hear how I survived the wilderness only to realize the real monster was waiting back home, subscribe and stick around, because this story is just getting started. My name is Emily, and I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I didn't grow up thinking my mother was a monster. That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. The truth is, I spent 16 years making excuses for her. 16 years convincing myself that the cold silences, the impossible standards, the way she could look right through me like I wasn't even there, I told myself that was just how she loved. Some mothers bake cookies, some mothers gives hugs. Mine prepared me for the world. At least, that's what I believed. My mother's name is Sandra, and on paper, she was everything a mother should be. She volunteered at school fundraisers. She brought homemade snacks to my soccer games when I was younger. She posted photos on Facebook with captions like, "My beautiful girl," and "So proud of this one." She knew how to smile for cameras. She knew how to make the outside world see exactly what she wanted them to see. But behind closed doors, that was a different story. Sandra had rules, lots of them, and they changed constantly, which meant you could never really follow them. You could never really win. If I got an A on a test, she'd ask why it wasn't an A+. If I cleaned my room, she'd find the one corner I missed and make me start over. If I cried, I was being dramatic. If I didn't cry, I was being cold, just like my father. My father, Richard, was a whole other situation. He existed in our house like a ghost, present but not really there. He worked long hours, came home exhausted, and spent most evenings in his study with the door closed. I used to think he was hiding from us. Now I realize he was hiding from her. We all were, in our own ways. Even my younger brother Dylan learned early to keep his head down and stay out of the crossfire. But I was the oldest. I was the one Sandra focused on. I was her project. The summer I turned 16, something shifted. I'd started pushing back more. Not in any dramatic way. I wasn't throwing tantrums or sneaking out or doing anything rebellious. But I'd started saying no sometimes. Small things. No, I don't want to wear that dress. No, I'd rather stay home than go to your friend's dinner party. No, I think I should be able to pick my own classes. Sandra didn't like no. She didn't like it at all. Looking back, I can see how the tension built that whole summer. The silences got longer, her comments got sharper, and then out of nowhere she announced we were going camping. Just the two of us. Mother-daughter bonding, she called it. Quality time. She said it with this smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and something in my stomach twisted. But what was I supposed to say? No, I don't want to spend time with you? That would have just confirmed everything she already believed about me. That I was ungrateful, that I was difficult, that I didn't appreciate everything she'd done for me. So I said yes. We drove to the Rocky Mountains on a Thursday morning. The drive took about 4 hours, and Sandra played classical music the whole way. No talking, no conversation, just Beethoven and the sound of tires on asphalt. I remember staring out the window, watching the landscape change from suburbs to highways to winding mountain roads, and feeling this strange sense of dread I couldn't quite name. The campsite was remote, really remote. We'd passed the main camping areas about 20 minutes back, and Sandra had kept driving until we found this spot off a dirt road that looked like it hadn't seen another car in weeks. There was no cell service, no other campers nearby, just trees and rocks and the distant sound of water somewhere. "This is perfect," Sandra said, and she actually smiled. The first day was fine, I guess. We set up the tent together. She'd brought supplies, a cooler with food, sleeping bags, a small propane stove. We made dinner over the fire, and she told me stories about camping with her own parents when she was young. For a few hours, I let myself believe this might actually be what she said it was: bonding, connection. Maybe she was trying in her own way. Then night came. It was darker than I'd ever experienced. City dark is nothing compared to wilderness dark. Out there, when the fire dies down, you can't see your hand in front of your face. The stars were incredible, but they didn't provide any real light. And the sounds, every rustle, every snap of a twig, every distant animal call, they all seemed amplified, like the forest was alive and watching. I was sitting by the dying fire, arms wrapped around my knees, when Sandra stood up and brushed off her jeans. "We need better firewood," she said. "The stuff we gathered is too damp. It's not burning right." I looked at the fire. It seemed fine to me. "Okay, I can help you look for some." "No," her voice was flat. "You'll go. I'll stay here and keep the fire going." Something cold slid down my spine. By myself? "Yes, Emily, by yourself." She tilted her head, studying me like I was a problem to be solved. "You're always saying you're grown up, that you don't need me telling you what to do. Well, here's your chance. Go find some dry wood. Prove you're as capable as you claim to be." "But it's dark. I don't have a flashlight." "Use your phone." "My phone's almost dead, like 8%. Sandra shrugged. "Then I guess you'd better be quick." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to laugh and say she was kidding, that of course she wouldn't send me into the pitch-black forest alone. But she just stood there, arms crossed, that familiar look of cold expectation on her face. I'd seen that look before, 1,000 times. It meant don't argue. It meant do what I say. It meant you will not win this. So I did what I always did. I obeyed. She handed me a small multi-tool from her pack, one of those cheap ones you get at gas stations, and told me to follow the tree line to the east. There was a fallen pine about a quarter-mile out. The wood should be dry enough. Don't take too long. I wanted to ask why she knew about a fallen pine if she hadn't already scouted firewood. I wanted to ask why she was sending me instead of going herself. I wanted to ask a lot of things, but the words stuck in my throat the way they always did with her. So I just nodded, turned on my phone's flashlight, and started walking. The forest swallowed me within seconds. I've tried to describe this to people, and I never quite capture it. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was a presence, a weight. It pressed against me from all sides, and my phone's weak flashlight cut through maybe 3 feet of it before giving up entirely. Every step felt like a gamble. Every sound made my heart lurch. I found the fallen pine. Sandra was right. The wood was dry. I gathered as much as I could carry, my arms straining under the weight, and started making my way back. That's when my phone died. 8% doesn't last long when you're running the flashlight. 1 second I had that tiny beam of light, the next I had nothing, just black, complete, absolute, suffocating black. I stood there, frozen, trying to control my breathing. Okay, don't panic. The campsite was back that way. I just had to walk in a straight line. I just had to stay calm. But have you ever tried to walk in a straight line in complete darkness, in unfamiliar terrain with rocks and roots and uneven ground? It's impossible. You drift. You second-guess yourself. You start to turn, just a little, without even realizing it. I don't know how long I walked. Maybe 20 minutes. Maybe an hour. Time stops meaning anything when you can't see. But eventually, I saw it. A faint orange glow through the trees. The fire. Our campfire. Relief flooded through me so hard my knees almost buckled. I stumbled toward that glow, branches scratching at my arms and face, not caring about anything except getting back to light, back to safety, back to... I broke through the tree line and stopped dead. The campsite was different. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. The fire was burning, but lower than before. Our cooler was gone. One of the sleeping bags was gone. And Sandra was bending over the back of the car, arranging something in the trunk. "Mom?" She straightened up, turned to face me, and in the flickering firelight, I saw something on her face I'd never seen before. Or maybe I had seen it 100 times and just refused to recognize it. Satisfaction. "You made it back," she said. Not warm, not relieved, just observational, like she was noting a minor fact. What are you doing?" I dropped the firewood. It scattered at my feet, but I didn't care. "Why is the cooler in the car? Where's my sleeping bag?" Sandra didn't answer right away. She finished whatever she was doing in the trunk, closed it with a solid thunk, and walked toward the driver's side door. "Mom," my voice cracked. "Mom, what's going on?" She opened the door, paused, looked at me over the roof of the car. "You say you're grown up, right?" Her voice was perfectly calm, perfectly measured, like she was discussing the weather. "You say you don't need me telling you what to do, that you can handle things on your own." A small smile. "Prove it." The words didn't make sense. They bounced around my brain like pinballs, refusing to land. What do you mean, prove it? Where are you going?" "Home." "What?" "I'm going home, Emily." She slid into the driver's seat. The dome light illuminated her face for just a moment, calm, composed, nothing like a mother abandoning her child, and then she pulled the door shut. I ran toward the car. My legs moved without my permission, pure instinct taking over. Mom, wait! You can't just..." The engine started. I slammed my palms against the window. She didn't flinch, didn't even look at me. "Mom!" The car started to move. I stumbled alongside it, still hitting the glass, still screaming. But she accelerated smoothly, like this was any normal departure, and I couldn't keep up. The taillights disappeared around a curve in the dirt road, and then silence. I stood there, alone, in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, with no phone, no supplies. No one knew where I was except the person who'd left me here. And somewhere out there in the darkness, animals were moving, weather was shifting, and the temperature was dropping with every passing minute. I was 16 years old, alone in one of the most unforgiving wildernesses in America, and I had absolutely no idea if I would survive the night. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the thought that crept into my mind as I sat there in the dark, hugging my knees and trying to stop shaking. What if she was right? What if I couldn't do this? What if I wasn't strong enough after all? The first night was the longest of my life. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean that every minute stretched into an hour, every hour into an eternity. The darkness was absolute, the kind of darkness that presses against your eyes and makes you wonder if you've gone blind. And the cold. God, the cold. I'd never understood how fast mountain temperatures could drop. By midnight, my breath was visible even without light to see it by. I could feel it, crystallizing in the air in front of my face. I'd managed to keep the fire going, at least partially. The firewood I'd gathered before, the wood Sandra had sent me to find, turned out to be my lifeline. I fed it into the flames carefully, rationing it like it was more precious than gold, because it was. That fire was the only thing standing between me and hypothermia. But fires need constant attention, which meant I couldn't sleep. Every time my eyes started to close, I'd jerk awake in panic, terrified the flames had died. I'd throw on another branch, watch the sparks spiral upward into the blackness, and start the cycle again. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I heard something moving in the trees. I froze. The sound was unmistakable, footsteps crunching through undergrowth, slow and deliberate, coming closer. My mind raced through possibilities. Bear, mountain lion, wolf? Every nature documentary I'd ever half-watched suddenly came flooding back, full of useless facts I couldn't apply. Play dead? Make yourself big? Run? Don't run? I grabbed the cheap multi-tool Sandra had given me and flicked it open. The blade was maybe 3 inches long. It would have been laughable if I wasn't so terrified. The footsteps stopped. I stared into the darkness, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The fire crackled. Something out there breathed. I could hear it, heavy, rhythmic breathing, just beyond the circle of light. And then, after what felt like hours but was probably seconds, the breathing moved away. The footsteps retreated. Whatever it was had decided I wasn't worth the trouble. I didn't sleep after that. I sat with my back against a rock, clutching that pathetic multi-tool, and watched the darkness until dawn finally, mercifully broke. Sunrise in the mountains is beautiful. I'd read that somewhere, probably in some travel magazine in a dentist's waiting room. But when you've spent the night alone and terrified, convinced you might not live to see morning, the beauty takes on a different quality. It's not just pretty, it's proof. Proof that you made it, proof that you're still here. I cried when the light came. Not sobbing, I was too exhausted for that. Just silent tears streaming down my face as the sky turned pink and gold and the world slowly became visible again. Then I took stock of my situation. Sandra had left me with almost nothing. The tent was still there, but the sleeping bags were gone, both of them. The cooler with all our food, gone. The propane stove, gone. What remained was a half-empty water bottle I'd left in the tent, 2 granola bars that had fallen out of the cooler, and the clothes on my back. That was it. That was everything I had to survive on. I knew I couldn't stay at the campsite. Sandra had driven us deep into the wilderness, far from any main roads or trails. If I waited for someone to find me, I could be waiting forever, and I had maybe 2 days' worth of water and food if I rationed carefully. So I made a decision. I would follow the sound of water I'd heard the day before. Streams lead somewhere. They flow downhill, toward civilization, toward people. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than sitting there waiting to die. I started walking. The next 3 days blurred together in my memory, not because nothing happened, but because everything happened at the same intensity, without breaks, without relief. I was hungry constantly, the kind of hunger that starts as an ache and becomes a scream. I was cold every night, huddling in the tent without a sleeping bag, wearing every piece of clothing I had. I was scared every moment, jumping at every sound, imagining threats behind every tree. But I kept walking. I found the stream on the first day and followed it like a lifeline. I rationed the granola bars, half a bar in the morning, half at night, and refilled my water bottle from the stream, praying I wouldn't get sick from whatever was in it. I walked until my feet blistered, then kept walking on the blisters until they bled through my socks. I watched the sun for direction. I talked to myself to stay calm, sometimes encouragement, sometimes screaming matches with my mother that I wished I'd had the courage to have in real life. On the second night, it rained. I huddled in the tent, shivering violently, listening to water drum against the fabric and wondering if this was how it ended. Not dramatically, not eaten by a bear or falling off a cliff, but slowly, quietly, hypothermia stealing my warmth until I simply stopped. I thought about Sandra. I thought about what she'd said, prove it, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Anger. Not just hurt, not just betrayal, rage. A fury so hot it actually warmed me just a little, just enough. She wanted me to fail. She wanted me to crawl back broken, to prove that I needed her, that I couldn't survive without her control. She'd engineered this entire thing to break me. And in that moment, soaking wet and freezing in a cheap tent in the middle of nowhere, I decided I would not give her the satisfaction. I would not die here. On the morning of the third day, I heard voices. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. I'd barely slept in 3 days. I'd eaten almost nothing. My body was running on pure adrenaline and spite. But the voices got louder, and then I saw them. 2 figures with hiking poles and bright orange backpacks, making their way along a trail about 50 yards from the stream. I tried to call out, but my voice cracked. I hadn't spoken to anyone but myself in days, and my throat was raw from the cold. I stumbled toward them, waving my arms, probably looking like some kind of wilderness creature. They saw me. They stopped, and the look on their faces, the concern, the alarm, told me exactly how bad I must have looked. "Oh my God," the woman said. "Are you okay? Where did you come from?" I opened my mouth to answer, and instead of words, what came out was a sob. 3 days of terror, 3 days of survival, 3 days of holding myself together by sheer force of will. It all collapsed at once. I fell into this stranger's arms and cried like the child I still was. The hikers, Mark and Diane, a married couple from Colorado, had a satellite phone. They contacted ranger troopers while I sat wrapped in their emergency blanket, sipping water they kept insisting I drink slowly. The rangers arrived within 2 hours, and suddenly I was in the back of their vehicle, being driven to the ranger station, being asked questions I barely knew how to answer. Name, age, how I'd gotten there, where my parents were. That last question made me pause. The ranger, a kind-faced man named Officer Hernandez, waited patiently while I figured out how to respond. I could have given them Sandra's number, I could have told them to call my father, but something stopped me. Instead, I gave them my Aunt Linda's number. Linda is my mother's sister, but they couldn't be more different. Where Sandra is cold and calculating, Linda is warm and chaotic and real. She'd always been my escape valve growing up, the aunt who actually listened, who didn't judge, who made me feel like maybe I wasn't the problem after all. When she answered the phone and heard what happened, she screamed so loud the ranger had to hold the receiver away from his ear. 4 hours later, she was there. She burst into the ranger station like a force of nature, wrapped me in a hug that actually hurt, and immediately started crying into my hair. "I thought you were dead," she kept saying. "I thought you were dead. I thought you were dead." When she finally let go enough to look at me, her face was blotchy and tear-streaked and furious. "Emily," she said quietly, "do you know what your mother told everyone?" I shook my head. "Your mother told us you ran away." Linda's voice shook with barely controlled rage. "She came home from the camping trip and told your father, told everyone, that you'd had a fight and run off into the woods. She said you were being dramatic, that you'd come back when you calmed down. She never—" Linda had to stop, take a breath. "She never reported you missing. She just went home, went back to normal, like nothing happened." The words hit me like physical blows. Not reported missing, just went home, back to normal. "She left me there," I heard myself say. "She sent me to get firewood, and then she packed up and drove away. She left me on purpose." Linda went white. "What?" "She planned it. She must have planned the whole thing. She knew exactly what she was doing." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Linda pulled me close again, and this time her hug felt different, protective, like she was physically shielding me from something. "You're not going back there," she said into my hair. "I don't care what I have to do. You're not going back to that house." 6 years passed. I wish I could tell you those 6 years were easy, that I went to live with Linda, finished high school, went to college, and emerged as a perfectly adjusted adult with no lasting trauma. But healing from something like that doesn't work on a schedule. It doesn't follow a neat 3-act structure with a satisfying resolution. The truth is, those years were hard. Harder than surviving in the mountains in some ways. Because the wilderness had simple rules. Find water, stay warm, keep moving. But navigating the aftermath of what Sandra did, learning to trust again, figuring out who I was when I wasn't constantly performing for my mother's approval, there was no guidebook for that. I did stay with Linda for a while until I turned 18. She tried to pursue legal action against Sandra, but it got complicated. Sandra hired a lawyer, claimed there was a misunderstanding, insisted she'd never intended to leave me and had simply lost track of where I was. The camping trip became he said, she said, with Sandra playing the distraught mother and me cast as the troubled teenager who'd caused the whole mess. My father took Sandra's side. Of course he did. And Dylan, my little brother, 12 years old at the time, was caught in the middle too. Too young to fully understand, fed a steady diet of Sandra's version until he looked at me like I was a stranger. I stopped trying to convince anyone. I just left. At 18, I moved to Seattle, far enough from Colorado that I couldn't accidentally run into any of them. I got a job as a barista at Starbucks. I rented a room in a shared apartment with 2 other girls, Mia, a nursing student, and Jordan, who worked at a bookstore and had a cat named Chairman Meow. It wasn't glamorous. I was tired all the time, barely making rent, and spending more on therapy than I probably should have. But I was free. For the first time in my life, I was making my own choices without Sandra's voice in my head telling me I was doing everything wrong. I built a life. Slowly, carefully, like stacking blocks and hoping they wouldn't fall. I made friends, I started taking online classes, I learned to cook, learned to budget, learned to recognize when the anxiety rising in my chest was real danger versus just my trauma response firing. I didn't contact my parents. They didn't contact me. It was like an unspoken agreement. We'd both pretend the other didn't exist. For 4 years, that worked. And then, on a random Tuesday morning in April, Sandra walked into my Starbucks. I saw her before she saw me. I was behind the counter, restocking cups, when the door chimed and this woman walked in wearing a designer coat and sunglasses pushed up on her head. She looked older than I remembered. More lines around her eyes, more gray in her hair, but it was undeniably her. My mother. Standing 15 feet away, scanning the menu board like she was any other customer. My body reacted before my brain caught up. My hands started shaking, my heart rate spiked so fast I got dizzy. I actually grabbed the counter to steady myself, knocking over a stack of lids that clattered to the floor. Sandra's eyes snapped toward the sound. And then she saw me. For one horrible second, we just stared at each other. Her face went through about 6 different expressions: surprise, recognition, something that might have been guilt, before settling on this strange, hopeful smile. "Emily," she breathed, like she was greeting an old friend. "Oh my God, Emily." She walked toward the counter. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Every survival instinct I'd developed in the past 6 years screamed at me to run, to hide, to get away from this woman who'd tried to kill me when I was 16. But my legs wouldn't cooperate. "I can't believe it's really you," Sandra said. Her eyes were wet, actual tears, glistening in the fluorescent lights. "I've been looking for you for so long. Your aunt wouldn't tell me anything. Your father said..." "None of that matters. What matters is you're here. We can finally start over." Start over. The words hit me like a slap.
"Start over?" I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, too quiet, too calm. "Yes," Sandra leaned forward eagerly. "I know things were difficult before. I made mistakes. I was under so much pressure and I didn't handle it well. But I've changed, Emily. I've done so much work on myself, and I just want my daughter back." My coworker, Becca, was staring at us from the espresso machine, clearly sensing something wrong. I should have called for a manager. I should have walked away. But something inside me needed to say this, needed her to hear it. "You left me in the mountains to die." The words came out flat, factual, like I was reading them from a report. Sandra's expression flickered. "That's not Emily. That's not what happened. I was trying to teach you independence. I never meant for you to get hurt. When I realized you hadn't come back, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. You drove away. I watched your taillights disappear. I was going to get help. I was going to... You went home." My voice was rising now, and I couldn't stop it. "You went home and told everyone I ran away. You never reported me missing. You left me out there for 3 days." Other customers were staring. Sandra glanced around, her composure cracking. "Can we talk about this somewhere private?" she whispered. "Please, this isn't the place." "No." I stepped back from the counter. "We can't talk about this. We can't start over. You need to leave." "Emily!" "If you contact me again, I'm filing a report." My hands were shaking so badly I shoved them in my apron pockets. "I mean it. Stay away from me." Sandra's face hardened. Just for a second, just a flash, but I saw it. The coldness underneath all that practiced warmth. The real Sandra, the one who'd calmly driven away while her daughter screamed and pounded on the car window. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "I'm trying to fix this. I'm trying to be a good mother, and this is how you respond? Goodbye, Sandra." I turned and walked into the back room. Becca followed me, asking if I was okay, if I needed to take a break, if she should call anyone. I didn't answer. I just sat down on a stack of supply boxes and tried to breathe. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, Sandra didn't take the hint. She sent emails from 3 different accounts. She found me on LinkedIn and sent a connection request with a message about how she just wanted to talk. She somehow got my address and showed up at my apartment twice, leaving notes under the door about how she was worried about me and missed her daughter. Then she started contacting other people. My roommates came home one day asking why some woman had approached them outside the building, wanting to know if Emily was doing okay and whether she seemed stable. My Aunt Linda called to tell me Sandra had been blowing up her phone, demanding to know where I lived, claiming she had a right to see her daughter. And worst of all, Sandra started telling people I was the problem, that I was mentally unwell, that I'd fabricated the whole camping story for attention, and she was the real victim of a troubled, ungrateful child. She was building a narrative, the same way she always had, controlling the story so that by the time anyone heard my side, they'd already decided I was crazy. I documented everything, every email, every note, every secondhand report of what she'd told people. I filed a police report for harassment in Seattle, though the officer warned me it would be hard to enforce against someone who technically hadn't broken any laws yet. And then Aunt Linda told me something that changed everything. "I need you to understand something about your mother," Linda said over the phone one night. "It doesn't excuse anything. Nothing excuses what she did. But Sandra wasn't always like this. Or maybe she was, and I just couldn't see it when we were kids. But something happened to her when she was young. Something our parents did." "What do you mean?" Linda's voice got quiet. "When Sandra was about 8, our mother used to leave her places as punishment. Parks, mostly. She'd tell her she was being bad, drive her to some random park, and leave her there for hours, sometimes until after dark. I felt sick. That's abuse. I know. I didn't understand it at the time. I was younger. I didn't know what was normal. But our mother had this idea that hardship builds character, that suffering makes you strong." Linda paused. "I think Sandra internalized that. She thought what our parents did was love, and she thought she was passing that love on to you." I sat there in my tiny apartment, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what I'd just heard. Sandra hadn't abandoned me because she was a monster. She'd abandoned me because she'd been taught that cruelty was kindness, because she'd never dealt with her own trauma, and instead of breaking the cycle, she repeated it. It explained everything. It didn't excuse anything, and it meant something else, too. It meant that Sandra would never stop. She would never understand why what she did was wrong. She would keep pushing, keep manipulating, keep trying to regain control, because in her broken worldview, she was the hero of this story. If I wanted this to end, I couldn't just hide. I was going to have to fight back.
The decision didn't come all at once. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment where I stood up and declared, "Enough," while inspirational music swelled in the background. Real life doesn't work that way. Real decisions, the ones that actually change things, they creep up on you. They build in the quiet moments. in the 3 a.m. hours when you're lying awake, replaying every conversation, every insult, every moment you stayed silent when you should have screamed. For weeks after Linda told me about Sandra's childhood, I wrestled with it. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy. Part of me wanted to forgive, to understand, to be the bigger person. That's what good people do, right? They break cycles. They extend grace. They don't become the monster that created them. But here's what nobody tells you about being the bigger person. Sometimes it just means being a bigger target. Sandra wasn't slowing down. If anything, knowing I'd filed a police report seemed to energize her. She got smarter about it. No more showing up at my apartment, no more direct emails from accounts with her name attached. Instead, she created fake profiles, anonymous accounts. She'd send me messages that were just slightly off, not threatening enough to be illegal, but unsettling enough to make my skin crawl. Thinking of you today, I drove past a coffee shop and thought of you. Mothers never stop loving their children, even when those children are confused. Confused. That was her new favorite word for me. In her narrative, I wasn't a survivor of her abuse. I was a confused young woman who'd invented stories for attention, and she was spreading that narrative to anyone who would listen. The final straw came on a Thursday evening in May. I was closing up the Starbucks, wiping down tables, counting the register, doing all the mindless end-of-shift tasks that usually helped me decompress. My phone buzzed, a text from my roommate, Mia. "Hey, some woman came by again. Said she was your mom's friend. Wanted to know if you were getting help. Seemed really worried about you. Kind of weird. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen, my stomach dropping. Sandra had sent someone. She'd actually recruited people into her campaign, convinced me I was the problem, and sent them to spy on me. Another buzz, this time from Jordan. "Okay, so Chairman Meow just knocked over a plant, and I found a business card underneath it. Sandra Mitchell, owner of Mountain View Wellness Boutique. Ring any bells? Was that the woman who came by last week?" I sat down heavily on one of the cafe chairs. Mountain View Wellness Boutique. Sandra's business, the wellness boutique she'd started a few years ago, some combination of yoga classes, overpriced essential oils, and pseudo-spiritual nonsense aimed at wealthy suburban moms. I'd heard about it through the grapevine, but never looked it up. I'd been too focused on trying to forget she existed. But now she was using her business, her network, her wellness community of devoted followers who thought she was some kind of enlightened life coach. She was weaponizing them against me. I pulled out my phone and for the first time in years looked up Sandra Mitchell online. What I found made me want to throw up. Her website was slick, professional, full of soft lighting and inspirational quotes. Transform your life through mindful living. Find your inner strength. There were testimonials from satisfied customers, photos from wellness retreats, a blog full of advice about healing family wounds and releasing toxic energy. And everywhere, on Facebook, Instagram, even a TikTok account, Sandra presented herself as this beacon of warmth and wisdom, a healer, a guide, a mother who'd overcome her own challenges to help others. Her Instagram bio literally said, "Mother, entrepreneur, survivor, teaching others to find their light." Survivor. She called herself a survivor. I scrolled through her posts with shaking hands, photos of her at wellness events surrounded by smiling women, videos of her giving advice about letting go of family drama and protecting your peace from toxic relationships. A post from Mother's Day featuring a photo of Dylan, now 18, looking uncomfortable, captioned with, "My son is my greatest blessing, grateful every day for the gift of motherhood." No mention of me, no photos. I'd been erased from her public narrative entirely. And in the comments, dozens of women praising her. "You're such an inspiration, Sandra. Your strength amazes me. So grateful for everything you've taught me." These people had no idea. They looked at Sandra and saw a success story, a role model, a woman who had it all figured out.
They had no idea she'd left her daughter to die in the wilderness and then spent years trying to gaslight the world into believing it never happened. Something shifted in my chest. The familiar anxiety, the fear, the urge to hide, it was still there, but underneath it, something else was rising, something hotter, harder. I'd spent 6 years being quiet, 6 years protecting myself by disappearing, by keeping my head down, by hoping that if I just stayed invisible, Sandra would eventually leave me alone. That strategy wasn't working. Sandra wasn't going away. She was getting bolder, reaching further, building a fortress of lies while I cowered in shadows. If I wanted this to stop, hiding wasn't enough. I needed to tell my story. The first thing I did was call Aunt Linda. "I need you to tell me everything," I said. "Everything about Sandra's childhood, everything about what our grandparents did, everything you remember." "Emily," Linda's voice was cautious. "Why? What are you planning?" "I'm not sure yet, but I need to understand. If I'm going to do anything, I need the full picture." Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Okay, but not over the phone. Come visit this weekend. I'll tell you everything." I took the bus to Denver that Saturday. Linda picked me up at the station and we drove to her little house in the suburbs, the same house where I'd crashed in her guest room after the ranger station, where I'd spent months trying to piece my life back together. We sat at her kitchen table with cups of tea, and Linda talked for hours. She told me about their mother, Evelyn, who'd grown up during the Depression with parents who believed hardship was character building. Evelyn had passed those beliefs on and amplified them. When Sandra misbehaved as a child, Evelyn didn't just scold her. She'd drive Sandra to empty parks, abandoned lots, even once a closed shopping center after dark, and leave her there for hours until Sandra was hysterical with fear. She called it teaching independence, Linda said, her voice heavy. She said Sandra was too soft, that the world would chew her up if she didn't toughen up. And Sandra believed her. She idolized our mother, even after everything. When Mom died, Sandra gave the eulogy and talked about what a strong woman she was, how she'd taught Sandra to survive anything. "Did it ever happen to you?" I asked. Linda shook her head. "I was the good one, the quiet one. I didn't need to be taught lessons." She laughed bitterly. "I just had to watch my sister get destroyed and not say anything about it." I thought about my own brother, Dylan, about how he'd watched Sandra focus all her intensity on me while he faded into the background. The parallel was chilling. "Sandra never got help," Linda continued. "She never processed any of it. She just absorbed it, turned it into this whole philosophy. Struggle makes strength. Pain builds character. And when she had you," Linda's eyes filled with tears, "I watched her do the same things to you that our mother did to her. The criticism, the impossible standards, the isolation. And I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. I just let it happen. You helped me," I said, "after the mountains. You were the one who—" "I should have done more, before." Linda grabbed my hands across the table. "I should have seen what she was becoming, and I should have stopped it. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." We cried together at that kitchen table, and then, when the tears dried, we got to work. Linda had kept things, documents, letters, photos. She'd been quietly archiving evidence of Sandra's behavior for years, not knowing what to do with it, not knowing if anyone would ever need it. There were old emails where Sandra bragged about her tough love parenting methods. There were photos from family gatherings where you could see me in the background, always slightly apart, always looking uncomfortable. There were birthday cards Sandra had sent me as a teenager that seemed sweet on the surface, but were full of subtle digs. "Hope this year you finally learn to appreciate what you have," and "wishing you maturity in the coming year." It was a paper trail of psychological abuse hidden in plain sight. I don't know if any of this is enough, legally, I mean. It's all so subtle. She never hit you, she never left marks. It's all emotional, psychological. That's hard to prove. I'm not trying to prove it in court, I said slowly, an idea forming. Not yet, anyway. I just want people to know. I want her to not be able to hide behind this wellness guru persona anymore. Linda looked at me carefully. What are you thinking? I told her about the Reddit post I'd made years ago, right after everything happened, when I was still living with Linda and trying to make sense of it all. I'd posted an anonymous account of the camping trip on a subreddit for survivors of parental abuse. It had gotten some attention at the time, a few hundred upvotes, supportive comments, people sharing their own stories. Then I deleted my account and tried to move on. But the internet doesn't forget. I could find that post, update it, add everything that's happened since, the harassment, the flying monkeys, her wellness business, keep it anonymous, but make sure the story is out there. And if someone connects it to her, I met Linda's eyes. Would that be the worst thing?
I spent the next month preparing. I retrieved my old Reddit post from cached archives and saved it. I compiled all the documentation I had. Screenshots of Sandra's messages, the fake profiles, the police report I'd filed, the notes my roommates had found. I organized it into folders on my laptop, backed up to the cloud with copies on external hard drives that I kept at Linda's house just in case. I researched. I learned about defamation laws, what I could say, what I couldn't, where the legal lines were. I talked to a lawyer during a free consultation and asked hypothetical questions about speaking publicly about personal experiences. The lawyer told me that truth is an absolute defense against defamation. As long as I only stated facts I could prove, I was protected. Facts I could prove. I could prove Sandra left me alone in the wilderness. The ranger report was on file. The hikers who found me had given statements. Linda could testify to what Sandra told the family when she came home. None of this was speculation. It was documented reality. I also started therapy again, twice a week this time, with a trauma specialist who helped me work through what I was planning to do and why. Not for Sandra's benefit. I was done caring about Sandra's feelings, but for my own. I needed to make sure I was doing this for the right reasons. I needed to know I wouldn't regret it. Why now? My therapist asked during one session. After all these years, why speak up now? Because she won't stop, I said. Because she's building this whole empire on a lie, and people are falling for it. Because she's reaching into my life and trying to destroy it, and the only power I have is the truth. And what do you hope will happen? I was quiet for a moment. I want her to stop. That's the main thing. I want her to leave me alone. But also, I struggled to put it into words. I want to stop being afraid. I've been afraid of her my whole life. Even when I moved across the country, even when I changed my name on social media, even when I did everything right, I was still afraid. And I'm tired of it. I want to take the power back. My therapist nodded slowly. There are risks, you know that. Once you put something out there, you can't control how people react. Your mother could escalate. Other people might not believe you. It could affect your job, your relationships. I know. And you're willing to accept those risks? I thought about the 16-year-old girl who'd watched her mother's taillights disappear into the darkness, who'd spent 3 days fighting to survive, alone and terrified, who'd crawled out of the wilderness only to discover that escaping the mountains was the easy part. Yeah, I said, I'm willing. The plan was simple. Too simple, maybe. I kept waiting for it to feel more complicated, more dramatic, more like revenge. But the truth doesn't require elaborate schemes. It just requires someone brave enough to tell it. Step 1, update my Reddit post. I'd go back to the survivorship subreddit, create a new anonymous account, and share the complete story, the original incident, the aftermath, the years of silence, and Sandra's recent harassment campaign. No names, no identifying details, just the facts. Step 2, TikTok. This was the part that scared me most. Reddit was anonymous, hidden in the corners of the internet where only people looking for these stories would find them. TikTok was different. TikTok was visible. But it was also where Sandra had a presence, where she was building her audience of devoted followers. If I wanted to crack her foundation, I needed to go where she was. I wouldn't name her. I wouldn't even name myself. I'd just tell my story. A teenager abandoned by her mother, surviving in the wilderness, rebuilding her life, and let people draw their own conclusions. Step 3, the business review. This was the nuclear option, the one I'd only use if Sandra didn't back down. A carefully worded review on her wellness boutique's public page, mentioning, without defaming, that the owner had a history of child abuse. Factual, documented, devastating. I drafted everything, rewrote it a dozen times, asked Linda to read it, asked my therapist, even asked Mia, who'd become a close friend by this point and knew the whole story. Everyone agreed it was fair, honest, justified. I scheduled the Reddit post for the following Monday, the TikTok video I'd record the night before, and the review, I'd wait, see how Sandra responded, give her one final chance to leave me alone. The weekend before my planned launch, I barely slept. I kept checking my drafts, rereading every word, looking for anything that could be twisted against me. I had nightmares about Sandra somehow finding out early, showing up at my apartment, making everything worse. I had moments of doubt so intense I almost deleted everything. Who was I to think I could take on someone like Sandra? She was established. She had money, followers, a network of people who believed in her. I was just a barista in Seattle with a traumatic past. But every time I wavered, I'd think about those taillights, about the sound of gravel under tires as my mother drove away, about the 3 days I spent fighting to live while she was home pretending nothing happened, and the doubt would crystallize into something harder.
The night before I went public, I almost got caught. I was at work finishing up my shift when my manager called me into the back office. Her name was Keisha, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who'd always been fair to me. "Emily," she said, closing the door, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My heart stopped. Did Sandra find out? Did she contact my work? Was I about to get fired before I could even... "A woman came in yesterday while you were off," Keisha continued. "Said she was your mother. Asked about your schedule, when you'd be working next." She paused. "She also said some concerning things about your mental health, about you being unstable, possibly dangerous." I felt the blood drain from my face. She asked if we'd noticed any erratic behavior, whether you'd made any concerning statements. She said she was worried about you, that she was a mental health professional trying to help her daughter. Keisha leaned forward. "I'm asking you right now, is any of that true?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. The fear was paralyzing, the old familiar terror of Sandra controlling the narrative, of people believing her, of being painted as the crazy one. But then something shifted. I looked at Keisha, who'd been nothing but kind to me for 2 years, who'd given me extra shifts when I needed money and let me leave early when I was struggling, who was giving me a chance to tell my side instead of just believing whatever Sandra had said. And I told her the truth. All of it. The camping trip, the abandonment, the years of no contact, Sandra's recent harassment campaign, the fake accounts, the flying monkeys, the smear campaign designed to make me look mentally ill. When I finished, Keisha was silent for a long moment. "Do you have any documentation of this?" she finally asked. "I have everything. Police reports, screenshots, witness statements." Keisha nodded slowly. "Then I suggest you keep copies of all of it, and I'm going to note in your file that your mother is not welcome on these premises." She paused. "I've seen this before, Emily. Family members who can't accept that their kid doesn't want contact. It's more common than you'd think." I could have cried with relief. "Thank you," I managed. "Don't thank me, just take care of yourself." Keisha stood up. "And if she comes back, you call me immediately."
I walked home that night with my heart pounding. Sandra was escalating, going to my workplace, trying to get me fired. She was running out of patience, and so was I. Tomorrow. I would post tomorrow. Monday morning arrived, gray and rainy. I woke up at 5 a.m., unable to sleep. I made coffee, watched the steam curl toward the ceiling, and opened my laptop. The Reddit post was ready. The TikTok video was uploaded, set to go live in 1 hour. Everything was in place. My finger hovered over the post button. I thought about Sandra, about the little girl who'd been abandoned in parks, who'd grown up believing cruelty was love, about the woman she'd become, broken and breaking everyone around her. I thought about myself, the 16-year-old screaming in the darkness as taillights disappeared, the 22-year-old rebuilding her life piece by piece, the person I was now, sitting in my tiny apartment, about to change everything. Was I doing the right thing? I didn't know. Maybe there was no right thing. Maybe there was just survival, adaptation, the desperate human need to not be erased from your own story. I took a deep breath, and I pressed post.
The first 24 hours were quiet. Too quiet. I kept refreshing the Reddit post, watching the upvote count climb slowly, 50, then 100, then 200. The comments trickled in, mostly supportive. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. Your mother is a monster. You're incredibly strong for surviving that." But TikTok was different. The video I'd posted was simple. Just me, sitting in my apartment, no makeup, no filters, talking directly into the camera. I didn't use Sandra's name. I didn't give specific locations or dates. I just told my story. The camping trip, the abandonment, the survival, the aftermath. I ended with a simple statement. If you're watching this and you've experienced something similar, I want you to know you're not alone, and you're not crazy, no matter what they tell you. By the end of the first day, it had 1,000 views. By the end of the second day, 10,000. By the end of the week, it had gone viral. I watched the numbers climb with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Comments flooded in, thousands of them. People sharing their own stories of parental abuse, of being gaslit, of being abandoned in different ways. People tagging friends, sharing the video, creating response videos. The algorithm picked it up and pushed it further, and suddenly, my face, my story, was everywhere. And people started asking questions. Who is this mother? Does anyone know? This sounds like someone I've heard of. Wait, isn't there a wellness influencer who talks about tough love parenting? I hadn't named Sandra. I'd been so careful not to. But the internet is full of amateur detectives, and my story had specific details: the Rocky Mountains, the timeline, certain phrases Sandra had used. People started digging, cross-referencing, connecting dots. Within 10 days of my TikTok going viral, someone posted a side-by-side comparison, my video on the left and Sandra's Instagram on the right. They'd found old posts where Sandra talked about her challenging relationship with her daughter. They'd found the Mother's Day post with only Dylan, noting the conspicuous absence of any other children. They'd found a blog post from years ago where Sandra mentioned taking her strong-willed teenager on a character-building camping trip. The post was titled, "Is this the mother from the viral abandonment story?" It exploded. I found out Sandra had seen everything when she called my Aunt Linda, screaming. Linda called me immediately after, her voice shaking. "Emily, she knows. She's seen the TikTok. She's seen the Reddit post. She's seen everything people are saying about her online. She's losing it." "What do I do?" I asked. "You don't do anything," Linda said firmly. "You've told the truth. Everything in those posts is factual and documented. She can threaten to sue all she wants, but she doesn't have a case.
What you need to do is stay safe. Don't engage with her, don't respond to anything she sends, and document everything just like you've been doing. I took her advice. I didn't respond when Sandra's emails started flooding in, unhinged rants of betrayal and ingratitude, threats of legal action, desperate pleas for me to take it all down before it's too late. I didn't respond when she created new social media accounts to leave comments on my videos, alternating between vicious attacks and tearful apologies. I just screenshotted everything and added it to the folder that was getting larger by the day. And I watched as Sandra's world began to crumble. The wellness boutique was the first casualty. Within 2 weeks of being publicly identified as the mother from my story, Sandra's business started hemorrhaging customers. People left reviews, not about her products or services, but about her character. How can I trust wellness advice from someone who abandoned her own child? This woman is a fraud. I used to admire her. Now I'm disgusted. Sandra tried to fight back. She posted tearful videos denying everything, claiming she was the victim of a coordinated smear campaign by her troubled daughter. She hired a PR consultant who advised her to stay quiet, then ignored that advice and kept posting. She threatened legal action against the people leaving negative reviews, which only made things worse. Nobody likes a bully, and threatening to sue your critics is a great way to look like one. The local news picked up the story. A reporter contacted me, asking if I wanted to comment. I declined. I'd said everything I needed to say, but they ran the story anyway, using my TikTok video and public records to piece together the timeline. The Ranger report from 6 years ago was a matter of public record. So was the fact that Sandra had never filed a missing persons report. That detail was what really damned her, because Sandra's whole defense rested on the idea that it was a misunderstanding, that she'd gotten confused, that she'd meant to come back, that she'd been searching for me the whole time. But the records showed she'd driven home and done nothing. For 3 days, while I was fighting to survive, she'd simply carried on with her life. There was no spinning that, no explaining it away. No amount of tearful Instagram videos could make that look like anything other than what it was. Her business partners started distancing themselves. Venues canceled her scheduled workshops. The wellness retreat she'd been planning for the fall was quietly scrapped. And the customers, the devoted followers who'd hung on her every word, they vanished. Some of them reached out to me directly, apologizing for ever supporting her, sharing their own stories of how Sandra had subtly manipulated or mistreated them. I hadn't expected that. I'd expected people to take sides, to argue about who was telling the truth. I hadn't expected Sandra's own community to turn on her so completely. But abuse, it turns out, rarely happens in isolation. Sandra hadn't just hurt me. She'd left a trail of damaged relationships, disappointed clients, and whispered concerns that people had been too afraid to voice. My story gave them permission to speak up, and once they started, they couldn't stop. The call from Dylan came on a Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer. I didn't recognize the number, and I'd been getting a lot of strange calls since going public. Reporters, podcast producers, random people who'd somehow found my phone number. But something made me pick up. Emily? The voice was deeper than I remembered, but unmistakably my brother. It's Dylan. Please don't hang up. I didn't hang up. I couldn't speak either, so I just waited. I saw your video, he said. His voice was strained, like he was forcing each word out. And I need to talk to you. I need to understand what happened. You know what happened. I told everyone. I know you did, but Mom, he stopped, took a breath. Mom always said you were lying, that you ran away and made up the story for attention. She said you were sick, that you needed help, that we shouldn't encourage your delusions by engaging with them. The words hit me like punches. I'd known on some level that this was the narrative Sandra had fed my family, but hearing it spoken out loud in Dylan's voice, the brother I'd helped raise, the kid I'd protected from Sandra's worst moods, it was devastating. And you believed her, I said flatly. I was 12, Dylan cracked. I was 12 years old and my mom was telling me my sister was crazy. What was I supposed to do? I wanted to be angry. Part of me was angry, but a larger part of me remembered what it was like to be a child in that house, caught in Sandra's gravitational pull, unable to see clearly through the fog of manipulation. "You're not 12 anymore," I said quietly. "No, I'm not." He was silent for a moment. "I've been reading the comments on your video, all these people sharing their stories, and I started thinking about things I saw when we were kids, things I didn't understand at the time." Another pause. "Dad left, last year, moved to Florida, barely talks to Mom anymore." I hadn't known that. I assumed my father would stay in Sandra's orbit forever, too passive to leave, too broken to fight.
"Mom's been different since everything went public," Dylan continued. "She's not eating. She's not sleeping. She had some kind of breakdown last week. Wouldn't stop crying, wouldn't get out of bed. Aunt Linda convinced her to check into a facility for her mental health. I processed this slowly. Sandra hospitalized. Sandra broken down. Sandra facing the consequences of a lifetime of cruelty. I waited for satisfaction, for triumph, for the victorious rush of revenge finally achieved. It didn't come. What came instead was a complicated tangle of emotions I couldn't begin to name. Relief, maybe? Sadness. A strange, hollow grief for the mother Sandra could have been, if things had been different, if her own mother hadn't broken her first. "Is she okay?" I heard myself ask. Dylan laughed, a bitter, exhausted sound. "I don't know. I don't know if she's ever been okay. I don't know if any of us have." We talked for another hour. He asked questions, and I answered them honestly. I told him things I'd never told anyone. The depth of Sandra's psychological abuse, the way she'd isolated me from everyone who might have helped, the constant feeling of walking on eggshells in my own home. Dylan listened. He cried. He apologized over and over for not seeing it sooner. "I want to have a relationship with you," he said finally, "if you're open to it. I know I have a lot to make up for." "You don't have to make up for anything," I said. "You were a kid. We both were. We were both just trying to survive her." When I hung up the phone, I sat in my apartment for a long time, staring at the wall. Something had shifted. The anger I'd carried for so long, the fuel that had powered me through 6 years of hiding and months of planning, it was still there, but it felt different now. Less like a fire and more like embers. Warm, but not consuming. 3 months after my video went viral, I agreed to one phone call with Sandra. I didn't do it for her. I want to be very clear about that. I did it for me. My therapist and I had talked about it extensively, the value of closure, the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, the power of saying what you need to say and then walking away. Linda was on the call with me, as a witness and support. Sandra was still in the facility, an outpatient program now, but still receiving daily treatment. When I heard her voice, it was nothing like I remembered. The steel was gone. The control was gone. She sounded hollow, fragile, old. "Emily," she said my name like a prayer. "Thank you. Thank you for talking to me. I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," I said honestly. I know I don't deserve." Her voice broke. I heard her take a shaky breath. "My therapist says what I did to you was child abuse. She uses that word, abuse. And I spent a long time arguing with her about it, telling her she didn't understand, that I was trying to help you, that I was teaching you to be strong." I stayed silent.
Linda reached over and squeezed my hand. But then she asked me about my own mother, about the things my mother did to me, and when I described them, when I heard myself say the words out loud, I realized I'd done the same things, the exact same things I swore I would never do. She was crying now. I could hear it, the wet, gasping breaths, the way her voice kept cracking. "I'm sorry." The words came out in a rush. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I'm sorry for the camping trip. I'm sorry for leaving you. I'm sorry for all the years of pretending it didn't happen, for telling everyone you were lying, for trying to destroy your life instead of facing what I did. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for the mother I couldn't be." I listened to her cry. I felt Linda's hand in mine, and I waited for something inside me to change, to soften, to forgive, to let go of the weight I'd been carrying. But that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. "I hear you," I said finally. My voice was steady, calm. "And I believe that you mean it right now. I believe that your therapist has helped you see things differently. I do mean it. I swear I—"
"But I need you to understand something." I cut her off, not harshly, but firmly. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm not forgiving you to make you feel better, or to give you closure, or to let you off the hook. If I ever forgive you, and I don't know if I will, it will be for me, for my own healing, not as a reward for your apology." Sandra was quiet. "We're not going to start over," I continued. "We're not going to have a normal mother-daughter relationship. That's not possible. Too much has happened. Too much damage has been done. What I'm willing to do is acknowledge that you're trying, acknowledge that you're getting help, and maybe someday, if you've done the work, real work, not just words, we can figure out what, if anything, comes next." "I'll do the work," Sandra said quickly. "I promise, whatever it takes." "I hope so, for your sake, not mine." I took a deep breath. "I'm going to go now. Linda can give you updates if you want them, but don't contact me directly. When I'm ready, if I'm ready, I'll reach out." "Okay." Her voice was small, defeated. "Okay, Emily. I love you." I didn't say it back. I wasn't sure if I ever would. I just said, "Goodbye, Sandra," and ended the call. That was 2 years ago. I'm 24 now, still in Seattle, still making coffee, though I've moved up to shift supervisor and I'm taking classes to become a licensed counselor. I want to help other people who've survived what I survived, kids from abusive homes, adults trying to make sense of their trauma, anyone who's been told they're crazy for remembering the truth. I started a support group, in person at a community center every Thursday night. It's small, usually about a dozen people, but it's something. I also volunteer with a crisis hotline, talking to people in their darkest moments, letting them know they're not alone. The TikTok account is still active. I post occasionally, updates on my life, resources for survivors, practical advice on setting boundaries and documenting abuse. The community that formed around my story has become something bigger than I ever imagined. We share our experiences, we support each other, we break cycles. Sandra finished her treatment program. From what Linda tells me, she's doing better, still in therapy, still working on herself. Her business never recovered. She closed it quietly and now works part-time at a nursery, selling plants. The irony isn't lost on me. Dylan and I talk regularly. We're building a relationship, slowly, carefully. He's in therapy too. We all are. My father reached out once. I didn't respond. And Sandra, I did talk to her again once on my birthday last year. A short call. She didn't ask for anything. She just said she was proud of me and that she was sorry. I thanked her. We hung up. I don't know if that will ever become more than what it is. I don't know if I want it to.
The truth is, some wounds don't fully heal. They become scars, part of you, always present, shaping how you move through the world. The best you can do is learn to live with them. People ask me sometimes if I regret going public, if I feel guilty for what happened to Sandra, the business, the breakdown, the public humiliation. I think about it a lot, and here's what I've come to understand. What I did wasn't revenge, really. Revenge is about hurting someone because they hurt you. It's about inflicting pain for the sake of pain. But that's not what I was doing. I was telling the truth. I was refusing to be silent. I was taking back a narrative that had been stolen from me when I was 16 years old, screaming into the darkness while my mother drove away. Sandra's world didn't collapse because I destroyed it. It collapsed because it was built on lies, and lies can only hold up for so long. The real victory wasn't watching her suffer. The real victory was realizing that her opinion of me doesn't define me, that I'm not the confused, unstable, ungrateful daughter she tried to make me believe I was, that I survived the wilderness, and I survived her, and I'm still here. Living well, as they say, is the best revenge, but telling the truth, setting boundaries, breaking the cycle so it ends with you and doesn't pass on to the next generation, that's not revenge at all. That's just healing.
So that's my story. All of it. From a dark forest in the Rocky Mountains to a viral video that changed everything. From a 16-year-old girl left to die by her own mother to a 24-year-old woman who refused to be erased. I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. Do you think I went too far? Or did I do exactly what needed to be done? Leave your answer in the comments. I read all of them. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever been silenced, gaslit, abandoned, or made to feel like you were the problem, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You're not ungrateful. You're not too sensitive. You're a survivor. And your story matters too. If you want to hear more stories like this one, stories of people who refused to stay quiet, who fought back, who took their power back from the people who tried to break them, hit that subscribe button. There are a lot more truths waiting to be told. And if you're going through something right now, something you're not sure you can survive, reach out to a friend, a counselor, a hotline, a stranger on the internet. You don't have to face it alone. I didn't have anyone when I was lost in those mountains, but I found my way out anyway. And so can you.